Hello and thank you for joining us today for the latest Society for the Environment Spotlight webinar. This month we have a focus on Chartered Environmentalist registration with the Nuclear Institute. So my name is Phil Underwood. I'm the Engagement Manager at the Society for the Environment. I'm here to give an overview of who the Society for the Environment are, what links us to the Nuclear Institute, and the basics of what the Chartered Environmentalist professional registration is, essentially. I'm delighted today to be joined by Cynthia from the Nuclear Institute and two Chartered Environmentalists here to share their insights into the Chartered Environmentalist registration. So please add any questions you have into the Q&A section of the toolbar, and we're going to try and go through those. We've got some time allocated at the end of both the talks from our special guests today. So please put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll pick them up in a few minutes' time. So let's start with a look at who the Society for the Environment are. So in short, we believe that proven competent environmental professionals across all sectors are pretty key to a sustainable future. So in the same way that a competent engineer is required to keep a power station standing, a competent environmental professional is required to ensure sustainable biodiversity net gain, or to implement sustainable low carbon technology and processes, for example. So other environmental responsibilities are available. This doesn't mean that you need to be in charge of the impact of the entire project or site. You could have a focus on the efficient use of materials, or waste management, or logistics, or air quality, or engineering to ensure the sustainable long life of the end product. Sustainability also doesn't need to be your core role. You can be an engineer or a scientist, but incorporate sound environmental good practice. So there's various different ways in which you could be a chartered environmentalist. So our core role is to register competent environmental professionals who have met and continue to meet a level of competence in their environmental work and their overall professionalism as well. There are currently nearly 8,000 registered environmental professionals known as our registrants, and hopefully many of you watching today or watching on the recording will be able to join them in the coming weeks or months. We do all this in partnership with 24 professional bodies, and we call them our member bodies. But to expand on what I just said, there are actually 3 professional registrations that we regulate. There's the registered environmental technician, the registered environmental practitioner, and a chartered environmentalist. So these registrations are positioned in a progressional way. So for example, a registered environmental practitioner might use that as a demonstration of a solid commitment to going on the progression ladder towards chartership, for example. But today we are purely focusing on the Chartered Environmentalist Register. So if you remember, I mentioned 24 professional bodies, and one of those is the Nuclear Institute. So to apply and to continue as a registrant, you must be a member of one of these professional bodies. It's on your screen at the moment. And you can apply for registration through that membership that you hold, not directly with the Society for the Environment. So as mentioned, as a member of the Nuclear Institute, if you plan to become one, you can then apply for Chartered Environmentalist registration, which is why we're here today, essentially. So all of this kind of creates a link between the Society for the Environment and the Nuclear Institute. But beyond the Society granting a license to NI to award the CEnv registration, NI are also members of the Society for the Environment. So we work in partnership to drive forward environmental good practice and support each other's efforts to champion and develop professionals in that space. So we both believe that professionals with proven continuously developing competence are vital to a sustainable future. So we've got some joint views there. Okay, so in a few moments, Cynthia will be outlining how to become a Chartered Environmentalist with NI and the requirements involved. But before then, I just wanted to give some highlights as to why you might want to become a Chartered Environmentalist. So key benefits that current Chartered Environmentalists stated in our 2021 survey last year were increased credibility with clients and stakeholders, increased self-confidence, and increased career opportunity. The credibility theme always comes out on top, and it's a huge benefit. So with the CEnv letters after your name, you are instantly telling people that you have been externally verified as a highly knowledgeable professional when it comes to environmental good practice and leadership and technical ability and so on. So you're always up to date as well through your CPD. There's also sometimes financial benefits. So one of our largest group of registrants are from the Institution of Environmental Sciences, and they, in their recent member survey, they found that Chartered Environmentalists on average earned around 35% more than their other members, which is useful to know. But it's not all individual benefits. It's beneficial to employers as well. So proven staff competence can help with winning work, improving your brand, and demonstrating that the staff are working on projects that they're at the top of their game, essentially. Okay, so this is a bit more detail into what it is. So we'll come back to more of the why when we speak to our speakers today. But very briefly, these are our 4 key competencies, or the headline competencies that you'll need to meet to become a Chartered Environmentalist. There are 12 competencies in total, but sit under these headlines. But we won't go through them in detail right now. If you want to find out more about that, you can either head to the Society of Environment website, or you can just head to the NI website. Plenty of details on there. Okay, so this is nearly finished, but given that you are tuned into this webinar, you will have an interest or a degree of knowledge when it comes to the impacts and opportunities around the environment and the nuclear sector. So I'm not going to go through those in detail, but it's the question that is at the foot of the page, which hopefully will show up. There it is. So that's the question I'm most interested in. Who makes the decisions that impact the environment? And beyond that, who makes the environmental decisions across all sectors and disciplines? So say you're a Chartered Environmentalist with the nuclear industry. You have a high level of environmental competence. This puts you on par with nearly 8,000 other Chartered Environmentalists from a vast range of sectors and roles and across the world, all making evidence-based decisions with proven competence and professionalism. So you'll be part of a global community of professionals who have committed to use their expertise to address environmental challenges and progress opportunities. So the CEnv registrations brings you together. And we think that's massively important to creating a more sustainable world, which links very nicely back to one of my first slides, which was the Society for Environment's main ethos. So we want you to join the others to lead the way in that sense. So that's probably enough from me. That was a whistle-stop tour. So what I'm going to do now is, what we'd like to do is bring this Chartered Environmentalist opportunity to life. So we're delighted to be joined by 2 professionals who have already gone through the process and achieved CEnv registration. So to start with, I'm going to hand over to Juliet and David to spend a few moments providing their insights into what they why they wanted to achieve CEnv and what it means to them. But please do note down any questions that you have in the Q&A section of the toolbar, and we'll go through those afterwards. So first up, I'd like to introduce Juliet Long, who works for the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. And I'll hand over to you. Juliet, do you have any slides, or are you?
I don't have any slides. I just have me. Right?
I'll stop sharing my slides then.
All right.
Over to you.
Great. Well, hopefully you can all see me and hear me. And good afternoon, and thanks very much for inviting me to participate in this. Delighted to be here. Now, Phil's just mentioned I work for the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. I'm the chief strategist for site decommissioning and remediation at the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. So what does that mean? That means that I work to really try and help set the direction of travel for our cleanup mission, which is of some 130 odd years long, involving multiple sites around the country, and really making sure that we do that in a way that is not only delivering that safe outcome, a more sustainable opportunity for use of those sites, but also that we do it in a way that not only protects the environment, protects people, but also transforms and delivers opportunities for people in the vicinity of our sites and more generally across society. I'll unpack that a bit more in a moment. I've got a fabulous role. I'm obviously there in that particular role with NDA. As part of that, I spend a lot of time working with government, trying to influence policy. I also spend a lot of time out and about across the sites with our site operators, and David will talk to you in a moment about the experience at Magnox. But very much exploring some of the particular different challenges that we have and trying to support how we go about resolving those. But more generally, working through the Nuclear Institute with many others across the sector in terms of resolving challenges, for example, around radioactive waste, and working internationally. Phil mentioned there the global family that we're part of in being chartered. And that recognition is something that I carry through with pride into some of the international committees and engagements that I carry out. And that comes on to really, well, yeah, why am I a chartered environmentalist? I've got a PhD in hydrogeochemistry. I did a postdoc in playing around rivers, looking at pollutant behaviour. So isn't that enough? Well, no, it isn't. We all collect qualifications during our lives, but they do go out of date. I'd be terrified if someone asked me to calculate some of the coefficients of partition. I used to be reeling off on a regular basis. The point about chartership is that it is about that acquiring that recognition of your peers, the demonstration through to them of your professional competence. In other words, your ability to take your knowledge, your understanding, and to show that ability in working with others. It's also then that kite mark, I like to think of it, that you take with you. Qualifications go out of date, job roles, titles, they'll come and go. We'll all change our labels, apart from that kite mark that comes with our professional recognition. So that's tremendously important certainly it's been important to me throughout my career, not only achieving it in that first place. When I first went into the industry, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed environmentalists, I got my qualifications, but I was faced with an awful lot of people fairly long in the tooth who'd been working in this industry for a long time. Why on earth should they listen to me with all those qualifications? Well, no reason. I had to work the hard way in building the experience, in demonstrating my competence. And I never wanted to have to go through some of those conversations again. And so that ability to really pull together that experience, to be able to have that road tested with other peers, professionals in the sector, not from within the sector I was working in, but from others, and to give me that kite mark was something that I still today carry with pride. And I've had to keep it. You don't get it for life. You have to commit to that ongoing professional development. And that in itself is also a tremendous thing of value to me. It reminds me to make sure that I'm keeping alert and alive to the thinking and the opportunities. And the brilliant thing about being involved in the Institute is it helps make that process easier. It helps me know where I can go to find information, who I can talk to. And that's tremendously useful too in the day job, because when we're trying to deliver these challenges within the industry, they aren't particular to the industry. Many of these challenges are faced in so many different sectors. Some are particular, but most aren't. And so that ability to reach out to other sectors, to bring that knowledge in is fabulous. So I'm absolutely pleased as someone who always suffers from imposter syndrome to be able to point to my badge of being a chartered environmentalist, to have that value of accreditation achieved from others, my peers, has been of tremendous value to me. So I certainly encourage you all, please, to think about it. Phil, back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Juliet. I think I'll be taking some quotes from that talk just then, just to perfect examples there for some really, really good insights. So thank you very much for taking the time to share them with us. I'm going to hand straight out over to David, if that's okay. And just a quick reminder for those who are listening, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A section of the toolbar, and we'll go through those. We've got David coming up next, and then we'll hand over to Cynthia for an insight from the Nuclear Institute point of view. But for now, over to David.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me okay. So my name is David Bremner. I work for Magnox Limited. I've worked for Magnox for 17 years, and I've been involved in a few different roles, including emergency arrangements, radiation protection advisor, radioactive waste advisor, non-RAD environment advisor, and a Class 7 transport consigner. Prior to that, I worked at the Dunray nuclear site for 18 years with the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority, and my roles there included as a radiochemist, a laboratory manager, and a waste manager. So just to give you a very brief overview of what Magnox do. So Magnox is part of the NDA family that Juliet just mentioned, and it's currently responsible for decommissioning 11 nuclear licensed sites. So that's just a very brief overview of Magnox's responsibilities. One of the other responsibilities I have is I'm actually a Chartered Environmental Assessor for the Nuclear Institute. So if any of you after today think about applying, you'll probably find that your application will be assessed by me. So, but don't send them all in at once. Okay, a little bit about Chartered Environmentalist and then my job. So I have a couple of main roles related to the environment. So I'm a radioactive waste advisor. So I provide advice to Magnox on the compliance with the radioactive substances legislation permit issued by the environmental regulator. And then my other role as a non-radiological environmental advisor, I provide advice to Magnox on compliance with other environmental legislation such as pollution prevention control, biodiversity, F-gas regulations, to name but a few. So I thought, because I'm a chartered environmentalist and I'm also an assessor, I thought I'd talk a little bit more about the chartered environmental principles that were mentioned earlier, and just to give you a flavour of, if you're applying to be a chartered environmentalist, how you prove that you've met some of those principles. So I'm going to go through some of them and give you some examples of what practical examples you should be putting down on your application if you plan to apply. So if I start with the first one, which is underpinning knowledge of sustainability principles in management of the environment and application of that knowledge, which sounds like quite a complicated term, but the kind of examples you could put down on your application form in relation would be through formal and informal training. So perhaps you've had some training on radioactive substances legislation or non-radiological legislation, and then you can also give examples of advice that you've provided in that legislation and say exactly what you did. So it's important to say what you've done rather than just a general explanation of what the legislation is. One of the other principles is analysing and evaluating problems from an environmental perspective to develop sustainable solutions. And again, you need to say what you did. So for example, you could say that you've developed a new environmental monitoring programme, or you've maybe done a human intrusion post-closure assessment for an in-situ radioactive waste disposal facility, for example. So again, these are just examples that I've thought of. Your examples might be quite different. Moving on to some of the other principles then, so promote behavioural and cultural change by influencing others in order to secure environmental improvements that go beyond the minimum statutory requirements. So again, you want to give some examples of what you've done. So that could be identifying poor practices, for example, in the management of potable liquid containers, and highlight improvements to management. And it could also include examples like inspecting waste compounds, and again, highlighting improvements to storage and labelling of waste receptacles. One of the other principles is promote a strategic environmental approach. Again, you need to say what you've done in relation to that. So that could be, for example, providing advice on best practical environmental option studies and following that up with BPM and BAT studies for example, legacy radioactive wastes. And also you could give an example of carrying out compliance inspections of contractors' arrangements against ISO 14001, which a lot of you be aware of as the kind of environmental standard. Moving on to a couple of other examples. So another principle is demonstrating leadership and management skills. So again, say what you've done. So you could give examples, for example, of developing new processes for example, clearance of wastes from nuclear sites, identifying staff who require training and development, and follow that up with post-adoption review of the review process. So again, that's just an example of how you could demonstrate a leadership and management skill. The other area is communicate environmental safety case confidently, clearly, autonomously, and competently. So again, an example could be that you identify environmental aspects and controls, and then communicate that to a range of stakeholders. Or you could also give the example of maybe delivering some sort of environmental awareness training. The other principle is ability to liaise with, negotiate with, handle conflict, and advise individual and group environments. So again, that could be liaising with project managers where there's an environmental non-compliance, leakage of oils from new systems, for example, and that is something that would stop a project where there are time and budget pressures. So it's all about giving examples of how you've liaised with other stakeholders and how you've managed that type of conflict. So that could be an example that you could give, or something similar. Moving on to some of the other principles. So encourage others to promote a sustainable approach. So again, you could give the example of during inspections, highlight good practices and improvements to management, and also giving environmental awareness training to different disciplines. Next principle is take responsibility for personal development and work towards and secure change and improvements for a sustainable approach and comply with relevant codes of conduct and practice. So for example, you could say that you actively seek out environmental training, self-study, attend seminars to keep up to date with legislation and new practices, etc. And give some specific examples of the training and seminars you've attended. And you could, and in relation to complying with relevant codes of conduct, you could give examples of other bodies that you're a member of and state which codes they have that you have to comply with. And coming on to the last couple of principles, demonstrate a knowledge of environmental ethical dilemmas. So again, you could give examples of always highlighting poor environmental practice and stating that you'd never walk past or ignore an environmental non-compliance, and then again give a specific example of when you've done that. So that covers all the kind of main principles, and just to give you a flavour of when and if you plan to apply to be a chartered environmentalist, the kind of topics you need to look at and the kind of topics where you need to give specific examples of what you've done. And I can't emphasize that strongly enough. You need to give specific examples of what you've done, because if you don't do that, it's likely that your application might be rejected or you're asked to resubmit it. So just a little bit now on why did I become a chartered environmentalist. So 3 or 4 reasons really: to gain external accreditation. Other people said to me it would be too much work and too difficult, which motivated me even more to apply. I also felt it would help me expand and enhance my knowledge of the environment and environmental legislation. And there is a requirement to undertake CPD, so it kind of drives you to keep up to date with legislation and new practices. And finally, the other reason I became a chartered environmentalist is because I believe that sustainability is important. And how has it benefited me? So I believe in becoming a chartered environmentalist, it's helped me with career development and expansion. One point I was going to touch on finally is, why do we need professionalism in the environmental sector within the nuclear sector? So I think it demonstrates to employers that they have professionals providing environmental advice to keep the company legal. It demonstrates to the regulators that environmental professionals are working within the industry. And I think it helps individuals with career development. So if you're applying for promotion, moving company, and who knows, it might even lead to giving you a pay rise, although that's kind of controversial in the current climate. And that's everything for me. I hope you found that of some use. And going forward, if you do plan to apply for Chartered Environmentalist status, I'm always available to provide advice on completing the application form. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. There's some really useful insights there, in particular from an assessor point of view. It's a good perspective to be able to have those kind of insights from. So thank you very much for that. We're going to hand over to Cynthia now to talk about the process involved in the application through the Nuclear Institute.
So, hi everyone. My name is Cynthia Hearing. I'm the Stakeholder and Business Development Manager at the NI. I've been with the NI only 8 months, so I'm still relatively new to the nuclear sector. But my primary role is I deal with our company and corporate members of the NI, of which I understand that many of you are or work for some of our company members, which is great. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the NI, the benefits of becoming a member with the NI, and also talk a little bit about our membership grades and how to register with us as a Chartered Environmentalist. Just a little bit about the NI. We work entirely for our members. We have professional development opportunities and volunteering opportunities across all of our branches and networks. We are a licensed body by not only Society for the Environment, but also the Engineering Council and the Science Council for other professional registration grades for chartered status. And we are a charity. We support the nuclear professionalism. We encourage education for nuclear energy and technology, and we also work with government to further public understanding of the uses of nuclear energy. So we have membership grades depending on where you are in your career. So we have affiliate, which are primarily our students and apprentices. Then we have associate. Once you have graduated, become an associate. So if you're not already a member with us as an associate, please do join, because that will give you a lot of benefits. And as I mentioned earlier, some of you do also work for some of our company members. So please do sign up via their company membership scheme, which will entitle you to another discount, and your membership is paid for by your company. Once you've been working for a few years, then that will be the start of applying for professional member. So MUCI, and then fellow is our ultimate highest grade of membership. Alongside that, one of the things that you will need to satisfy as part of becoming a member of the NI is our nuclear delta. And I will go to the next slide. So for professional membership, we've got 2 different grades, member or fellow, and then you can apply for professional registration alongside becoming a professional member of the NI. And obviously Society for the Environment as a Chartered Environmentalist is one of them. We do also offer the Registered Environmentalist Technician, as well as we're a licensed body for that. So one of the requirements for membership is to satisfy our nuclear delta. I'm not going to go into much detail on this. Our information on our nuclear delta standards can be found on our website, but there are 3 main areas that you'll need to demonstrate a clear understanding of, and that's nuclear safety culture, nuclear security culture, and nuclear technology and safety, and also demonstrate a commitment to personal behavioural standards within the nuclear industry. And as I said before, all of our information on our nuclear delta standards can be found on our website. So in terms of the application process, we are registered for both Chartered Environmentalist and Registered Environmentalist Technician. To apply for member or fellow, and or Chartered Environmentalist registration, we have different application forms that you'll need to complete, and you'll need to also submit supporting documentation to support with evidence for your application. And again, more information on our membership grades and Society for the Environment can be found on our website. So why should you apply for membership with the NI? Well, it demonstrates your understanding and personal contribution to nuclear safety and security cultures and the safe use of nuclear technologies. It's a peer review acknowledgement of your expertise and your experience to give you the title of NUCI or FNUCI, as well as a chartered environmentalist. It also, as we've already heard, it provides added value for the nuclear sector employers, and we are exclusively nuclear, and also it demonstrates your commitment to maintain and update your nuclear professional competence through maintaining your CPD throughout your career, which is one of the requirements for registration. So in terms of the benefits of membership, we've got lots and lots of benefits. I've just picked out a few key ones here. It will allow you to boost your career in the nuclear sector. We have a very, very engaged young generation network, and they work very hard to promote the nuclear industry and the sector throughout the country. As well as our regional branches. All of their details can again be found on our website. So if you want to link in with the Young Generation Network or our regional branches, please do get in touch with them. They're always looking for volunteers to join them. So please do have a look. You'll be able to get connected with our members. We have our NI Connect, where we have lots of different postings on there. So once you become a member, you'll have access to that. You'll be able to access and develop your knowledge. So through webinars, events, conferences, we're starting to move back into face-to-face, as well as continuing on with the virtual webinars. So there's lots of things that you can get involved with and get participate in. Our Nuclear Future is our bi-monthly journal, and as a member you'll get that as a copy, and it is purely nuclear. We also offer discounts for our members for events and conferences, so it can be anything up to 20% off the non-member price. So please do take that into consideration, as well as when you become a member. There are more benefits that I could go into, and if you click on that link there, you'll see where we have more benefits. So just in terms of member support, so you've got my contact details there if you want to get in touch with me directly. We also have our general membership inquiries mail account, and then you've got our website there for more news, events, and also the Society for the Environment. And that's all from me, so I will stop sharing.
Magic. Thank you very much for that, Cynthia. So it's a good insight into how it works as a member or somebody aspiring to be a member of the Nuclear Institute. So now we go on to our Q&A section of our webinar. So if you do have a question for anybody on the webinar, please feel free to put them into the Q&A box in your toolbar. If you're on a desktop, I think it should be at the top, or it might be at the bottom. It changes around whether you're a panelist on a webinar or if you're a guest, and sometimes I get a little bit confused. And if you are watching on a mobile, then if you tap your screen, you should be able to find some options on there. So let's see what we've got here at the moment. It's an interesting one to start off with. I'm currently a PIEMA and FNUCI. Is that the right pronunciation, Cynthia? Nod of approval. Thank you very much. Would I be better to go through IEMA to get CEnv registration with IEMA or Nuclear Institute? Now that is, on a Nuclear Institute webinar, an interesting question, but essentially from a SocEnv point of view, feel free to chip in anybody, whichever route you go down, the Chartered Environmentalist standards are the same. There are, if you are more in the nuclear side, then the assessor will understand more of the nuclear elements that you are talking about, which could be beneficial in a way, but the standards of your knowledge and the competencies that you have to demonstrate are exactly the same. So it's partly a preference thing. Are you going to get more from being a member of the Nuclear Institute? Are you going to gain more from being a member of IEMA? Clearly you can be a member of both. So it's a personal decision. Would anybody else want to add to that?
Afraid not, Phil. You're on your own with that one. I mean, but I think you're right, largely. I mean, it is quite preference. I mean, whichever way you go, it's the assessors are of tremendous value. The conversations you have as part of that assessment are, you know, whether or not actually you're going for chartership, everyone ought to go through it really, because it offers you that further insight and that little bit of challenge, which is useful. So, yes, if you've spent most of your life in the Nuclear Institute, perhaps. Sorry, Cynthia, maybe it is time to reach out and build some of those contacts elsewhere. But actually, if what you're wanting to do is to build your network within the nuclear sector itself, then I'd stick within the Nuclear Institute.
I had my my journalist hat on there, and I was sitting on the fence. It's probably the best way for me to be. But
well,
right, let's have a look for some more questions that are coming in. Okay, a similar question. I don't think I'll be able to answer this one particularly. As a chemist working in environmental regulation, what are the benefits of CEnv over CChem? My only suggestion would be the cross sector element of Chartered Environmentalist registration. It's across so many different sectors that it's identifiable in that way. But clearly, Chartered Chemical Engineering, Chartered Chemist, Chartered Chemist, read it again. Yeah, clearly extremely beneficial as well.
I would say, being personally a chartered chemist and a chartered environmentalist, I would go for both.
That is input that I agree with. Excellent, well put. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sorry, Phil. I mean, I think just to add to that, I mean, the emphasis with environmentalists, and of course you can be an environmentalist in all manner of different specific backgrounds, but there is that emphasis too on sustainability. And I think, you know, if your passion is about delivering sustainability and in that rounder sense, delivering for the environment, and you know, I've stuck with CEnv. Some people seem to collect different types of certifications. Well, it does take time to manage those certifications. So I would actually be a bit wary about trying to collect them like worry beads. But, have a sense as to where you want to be getting to in life. What's the passion that gets you out of bed? If it's absolutely chemistry, go for CChem. If it's actually using your chemistry for the fulfillment of opportunities to better the environment and society, then I would go for CEnv.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much for that. The next one that's come in is this is a Magnox sponsored nuclear graduate currently registered with the Nuclear Institute and the Geographical Society. I've struggled to find appropriate CPD opportunities to push for, oh, it just moved on my screen, to push for chartered geologist or chartered scientist with the Geological Society. I need to put my specs on. Do you think Chartered Environmentalist is a more relevant status to work towards in the nuclear industry? Now, as somebody who's not in the nuclear industry, it's tricky for me to answer that one.
I would say, depending on what area within Magnox you're working in, if you're going to be working in an environmental sort of discipline, then you should be able to get plenty of opportunities for CPD within Magnox for that. But again, it really depends on what area in the graduate scheme you're focusing on. It sounds like it's kind of geology more than environmental, but there can be a bit of a crossover between those two as well. So certainly within Magnox, you should be able to get plenty CPD for environmental aspects.
Yeah, it's a huge demand for geoscience within the nuclear sector. So, our site decommissioning remediation, that ability to characterize and to understand our sites, to advise and assess on the best approaches to the cleanup. So that understanding of not only the geology, but behavior of contaminants within it. And of course, some of the challenges around disposal, whether that's near surface or geological disposal. Absolutely fabulous to hear. We've got someone with that background on the call. So it really, again, is, I think, down to your preference in terms of how you want to use your geology, whether you want to use it in that broader sense, or really focusing in on the particular art of becoming a fully competent geologist.
It's certainly no one answers to these questions, unfortunately, but it is part of the personal preference. It is part of your career journey. Where do you want to go? But Jacob, it sounds like you're needed. So whichever path you go down, keep going down the path. You're very much needed. Now, the next question is how difficult would it be to get an environmental chartership without an environmental or geography background? Now, if you don't have an environmental background at all, that would become tricky to get an environmental chartership. But it depends how you interpret that question, I think, possibly. Does anybody like to have an input on that one?
I think, go ahead. From an assessor point of view, if I was looking at it as an assessor, we tend to look for people with kind of a master's kind of level qualification in some sort of environmental related topic. If you don't have a master's, we can use something called experiential learning. So if you've been working for a number of years at a kind of master's level, doing some research projects in the nuclear industry that relate to the environment, we can take account of that, and that would negate the requirement for a master's degree. So if you can build up some experience in environmental topics, then you certainly would be able to apply. That would be my view from an assessor point of view.
Yeah, absolutely support that, David. And I think my experience, I mean, the fabulous thing is when you get the converts, when you see people who've come through and they haven't had an environmental background, but actually they become impassioned and they want to get involved and they want to support organisations and businesses in doing better, not only because of their own interests, their interests of the future of their grandchildren. So we find that an awful lot of people actually coming across into the environmental aspects of our work voluntarily, and then becoming champions within the business and actually building up their experience that way. And so absolutely, as David said, there is that experiential route, and that is absolutely just as valid as having a bit of paper that says that at some point in time you passed an exam. It's that combination of the passion within, that knowledge and building of the understanding, and your ability to demonstrate that actually you can do this work. So, which is, I think, fundamental.
Absolutely. That link between the knowledge that you have, whether that's through education or through experience, and the experience you have in terms of implementation and that kind of thing, those two combined are a powerful thing when it comes to becoming a chartered environmentalist and charters, whatever it might be. From a Society for the Environment point of view, there are no specific qualifications that you need to become a chartered environmentalist, because chartered environmentalists are so broad in their nature in terms of the different specialisms they have across a huge spectrum of sectors and disciplines. And there are hundreds of chartered environmentalists who do not have master's degrees. You do not need one. Our vice chair of the society, he doesn't mind me saying that he doesn't have a degree, let alone a master's degree. He's a very successful chartered environmentalist. So there are very good examples out there. So don't let that put you off, it's fair to say. Keep these questions coming in. I had a question via email before, I think it was a couple of days ago actually, which I did respond to, but I thought it might be nice to respond to it on here as well, which is probably aimed towards Cynthia actually. They were asking about whether you had to become a member or a fellow before applying for Chartered Environmentalist registration. And I think it was on one of your slides that if you're not a member currently, you can apply to be a member and Chartered Environmentalist at the same time. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. Simple as that. There you
go.
Do you need to be a member before you become a fellow?
No, you can apply direct to become a fellow of the NI.
Okay. And a fellow and Chartered Environmentalist if you want to. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Or if you're already a member or already a fellow, you can then add Chartered Environmentalist with the other application form. There you go. Well, that's cleared it up for me as well. So that's always useful. I had a question to David. You mentioned a whole raft of different roles that you have within Magnox and possibly previous to that as well. Did you use a lot of those examples from all those different types of roles within your CEnv application, or did you focus on 3 or 4 main roles that you had? How did that work?
Probably mainly the radioactive waste advisor and the non-RAD environment advisor roles that I have, less so the radiation protection and the kind of class 7 transport stuff. And I didn't use too much of my experience from Dunray from memory in that. So mainly my current employers and those 2 environmental roles.
Okay. Now we haven't got any more questions coming in, so I'm going to ask another one of mine if that's okay. Now, do you have any, so in terms of the nuclear sector, nuclear industry, clearly the environment is pretty key, and you guys will probably agree with that. Are there more opportunities coming about at the moment? If somebody is wanting to go into the nuclear industry and they have a real interest in the environment, are there more roles becoming available? Is that becoming more of a thing, or is it plentiful anyway?
Shall I kick off, David? I mean, goodness, yes is a simple answer. We have a burgeoning sector. It's absolutely growing, and that's both in terms of the work that we need to do to deliver the cleanup of the legacy sites. I mean, here with the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, we have David was telling you about all the Magnox sites, the Sellafield site, Dunray, some of the initial research sites. To deliver decommissioning over the next 130 years. So we need to sustain a throughput of the capable employees, the workforce to be able to deliver that work. Currently, here and now, there are constraints in our ability to deliver some of the work because of the availability of those suitable environmentalists to come in and provide advice, whether it's through the supply chain or within some of the organisations ourselves on that work. We know that there are aspirations to expand and put more nuclear gigawatt onto the grid. That requires environmentalists involved right from the start. The problem we made in this country was we didn't have environmentalists involved right from the start of the nuclear industry. And that's why it's a very complicated, challenging process to clean it up with the old legacy sites. So we absolutely need to avoid that. If we want to be able to solve climate change by contributing nuclear energy, we want environmentalists to be able to come and get involved right from the start, getting the right design, getting the right site selection in place, building those facilities so they make that clean, sustainable contribution that we want to see absolutely made. And then finally, the big predicament with nuclear, everyone always lands on is the how to resolve the waste disposal challenge, radioactive waste disposal challenge, the particular Achilles heel of the nuclear industry. So, we need people to be able to help explain to stakeholders about the environmental benefits of the industry, about the environmental challenges of radioactive waste disposal, to also undertake the assessments and to inform the engineering we'll need to be putting in place and to then manage those disposals going forward. So yes, please, lots more.
All I would add to that is across the nuclear sector, whether it's decommissioning, new build or operations, There are lots and lots of projects happening all the time, whether it's new build or demolition. And I would say 10 to 15 years ago, the project managers' understanding and awareness of non-RAD environmental issues was probably poor. You know, things like biodiversity, pollution prevention control, F-gas regulations. Very little knowledge in the project management field 10, 15 years ago, but I would say they're much better educated now and much more aware of those kind of things, because we've got environmentalists and environmental advisors embedded in projects, and we're going to need that kind of embedment going forward, I would say.
Absolutely. And I guess there's environmental advisor in all sorts of different sectors, obviously, but if you have an environmental advisor who has specific knowledge in the nuclear sector, that's surely a beneficial thing to have for you two in particular. Excellent. I can't see any more questions coming in. David, you have been recognised as somebody, with a former colleague, I believe, somebody called Ron, but we'll leave that one for now. So
hello, Ron.
There you go. Hello, Ron. Cynthia, did you have any closing words?
No, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you that have attended today. We hope that it's inspired you, enthused you. We are in a growing industry at the moment, which is a really good place for the Nuclear Institute. We're seeing companies joining us and members joining us, and increases in professional membership applications, which is really, really good news. And I'd like to thank both David and Juliet for giving up their time today. We hope that it's given you a bit of an insight into what they do, and hopefully encourage you to become Chartered Environmentalists, and also to Phil as well for facilitating jointly with us today from the Society for the Environment. And if you do have any questions that you can think of afterwards, please just drop them to me on an email and we will come back to you. So thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you very much, Cynthia.